MS Now's Fallon Gallagher has been following the court battle over the ballroom. Peter Baker is chief White House correspondent for the New York Times and an MS Now contributor. And Susan Page is Washington bureau chief for USA Today. Fallon, let's start with the arguments over the president's ballroom project. What did you hear there in court today?
Yeah, Ariel, these arguments lasted just over 2 hours, and this is an appeals court that appears largely divided over the future of the ballroom. And that's largely in part because of this national security argument that the Trump administration has been making. They're saying that the ballroom itself is very important for the president's security at the White House complex, and that it would have prevented things like what happened at the White House Correspondents' Dinner and other attacks on the president's life if they had the ballroom. Now, what's really important to note is that that is a newer argument that the administration has been introducing since this appeals process started to play out. They've always made some sort of a security argument, but that was more back in December, more in a response to the fact that they had completely demolished the East Wing. There was a giant hole in the ground. It was an active construction site. It wasn't really that the ballroom itself was critical, and that's become a key argument and a new argument, and what they spent most of this hearing arguing today. Now, the trust has said that this is an unconstitutional project and that there's a statutory authority in place and that the president needs Congress's approval to do this project. And they're saying, look, there can be national security concerns, but those don't trump the congressional authority here. They're saying that there's precedent of this where Congress still has that authority. And they're also saying, look, there may be national security concerns. The president may just want this project. He can ask Congress for it, and that's how he'll get it. And so that's become really the central argument here today. There was skepticism from some of the judges, support from others. This is, of course, a three-judge panel. One is an Obama appointee, one is a Biden appointee, and one is a Trump appointee. The Trump appointee had some very sharp questions for the National Trust over whether or not they even had the authority to bring this lawsuit in the first place. But I want to remind you something really important, because Judge Richard Leon is the district court judge who blocked this construction in the first place. The appeals court temporarily allowed it to continue while this appeal was playing out. But in Judge Leon's order, he specifically allowed for below-ground national security-related construction to continue. He simply said that all above-ground ballroom construction could not continue. And what's really important to note about Judge Richard Leon's order is that it was informed by classified documents that have to do with the national security. He reviewed these documents ex parte, meaning outside of court. And so he knows the national security stakes and what they're trying to do, and he still issued this ruling. But as far as the appeals court, I would expect we'll get a ruling in the coming weeks or months. Ariel?
Fallon, thank you so much for such a comprehensive overview of what you're seeing play out there. And Peter, what do you make of the administration, the way the administration is trying to turn this into a national security argument? You heard from Fallon's reporting there that the plaintiffs point out that that had not been the argument all along.
Yeah, no, that wasn't why he did this. He made it very clear why he did this when he first knocked down the East Wing. He wanted a big ballroom. He wants a place to have a big spectacle, a place where he can, fet visiting foreign leaders. And there's an argument, by the way, to be made. The state dining room where presidents have traditionally hosted foreign leaders is relatively small. You can only seat about 135, 140 people. Many presidents in the last number of years have had to put cathedral tents on the South Lawn because they had more guests that they wanted to have. So there's been an argument about the ballroom. It was never about security. Now it's become about security because it sounds better to the public than, hey, I want a really big ballroom. And there is a security element to it, obviously, because underneath the East Wing is where they had the bunker. That's important for, security on a day like a 9/11. Well, nobody told him to rip it out without congressional approval. This is a decision he made. The problem here is, having knocked down the East Wing, something's going to have to go there. So at some point or another, somebody's going to have to figure out how to proceed in a way that makes some sort of sense. And it's possible that the president can win in court and be able to proceed without Congress. But broadly speaking, most presidents have found it more advantageous to find some sort of a consensus when they made changes to the White House so that people can agree that it's for the people, not just for the president who lives there.
Yeah, they had put facts on the ground already. You can't just leave a big gaping hole there on the property. Susan, an organization called Public Citizen did some digging and found out that the majority of corporations that have donated to this ballroom have also received new or increased government contracts during essentially the same exact period. We're talking about contracts worth a combined $50 billion. That's an estimation. And of course, we don't at this point have any clear connection between these two things. But Public Citizen says the donations amount to, quote, massive and inescapable conflicts of interest. What do you see going on here?
And of course, these are only the corporate donors we know about. We haven't had a comprehensive listing of who's given money to the ballroom. For these donors, most of them have now received billion-dollar contracts since the donation was made. Others have gotten regulatory relief that they had been seeking from the administration. And as you said, we don't have a clear quid pro quo. It's not like we found that Public Citizen put out a memo that said, if you give $1 million, we will do this for you. But you look at the evidence, and it seems like an example of what good business it was to give money to this ballroom when the president was seeking to fund it.
Peter, the president has gone to great lengths to try to portray these projects as a benefit to the country, that he's doing a service to our country by adding all of these beautification projects. That includes the massive 250-foot arch that he wants to build at the Memorial Circle. Here's what he said about that on Thursday. Let's listen.
Every city, just about every major city, has a triumphal arch. This is an arch that's a real bow, a beautiful bow to your military and military victories. Nobody's had more military victories, including recently, than we have. And they never got the arch built.
Trump is trying to telegraph or angle that this is a testament to American strength. Is that how history is going to see this?
Well, a lot of arches around the world are built to military conquest, and that's not something America traditionally has stood for. America has, at least, in its best moments, has been the country that went to prevent conquest of smaller nations, not championed, military for the sake of military. And I think that, part of it is that it's Trump and people don't like things that Trump does, and he does things on his own without bothering to see if anybody else might like it. Part of it is the scale of it. Right, it's so big it will just dwarf Arlington National Cemetery, which is behind it. It will dwarf, the Memorial Bridge and the Lincoln Memorial on the other side. I think it's not just how he's going about it. It's not just the fact he's going about it, but the scale of how he does it. The excess that seems so out of proportion to a city that traditionally has actually been very modest in its monuments, traditionally and intentionally. That's the way early, leaders of this country wanted it. They didn't want this to be a country, a capital filled with grandiosity. They wanted it to be something modest. Look at the White House. It's not meant to be Versailles Palace. It's meant to be a house. And I think that Trump is running against that tradition, and I think the way he's doing it has made more enemies than it might have been had he decided to try to work with people and say, hey, what possibilities are there?
The People's House. And Susan, speaking of the people, there were about 1,700 public comments about Trump's arch, and a lot of them very critical. One saying, quote, this kind of egotistical display is reminiscent of Mussolini, Kim Jong-il, or Saddam Hussein. It will be up to the next administration to tear it all down. Even if future administrations want to reverse some of this construction that's going on, what Trump is doing, how difficult would that be? How does that work?
Well, it would be a challenge we have not yet faced. If you build a big arch and the next president wants to take it down, what do? You're right, 1,700 comments, overwhelmingly negative, and yet it did nothing to slow down the decision by this national commission to move ahead, to prove moving ahead with the big arch, a commission that President Trump has stacked with Trump supporters. I mean, that's one of the things that is giving pause to people, including people who voted for President Trump and support him, about both the speed and the scale of some of the changes he's making in our capital city with no effective oversight or review.
Peter, it's interesting. A lot of the comments pushing back about the arch aren't even related to politics. Some are arguing that it's expensive, it's unattractive, it's unnecessary, even disrespectful or dangerous, contrary to America's character, as you sort of referenced. It's not the humility that we see sort of pervasive in Washington. From a political standpoint, why does Trump still think all of this is a good idea?
It's a good question. There's not been some popular uprising saying, hey, guys, we need an arch. That's not why he got elected. He didn't go out on the campaign trail in 2024 saying, hey, guys, I'm going to put my name on the Kennedy Center. I'm going to build an arch. I'm going to tear down the East Room. These are not things Americans were hankering for, right? This is Trump's hankering for. He's hankering for, legacy. He wants to put his stamp on the Capitol in a way that outlasts him. This is a man who will turn 80 in a few days. and he's thinking about what comes next after he's out of office, after he's off the stage, and he wants something to be remembered. This is, of course, what he's done his entire career, slapped his name on hotels and buildings all around the world. But this is a different situation here, obviously. And politically, you're right. It's an interesting question. Who's asking for it? Nobody. But there is a negative backlash to it. And the backlash is a lot of Americans who are paying more at the pump, who are having a hard time affording groceries and health care and housing, are looking at what they see in the news, and they see a president who's focused on a promenade over, the Rock Creek Parkway and on an arch and putting his name on things. And that doesn't seem to address their issue. So a lot of Republicans are nervous about this sort of spate of monument building.
Peter, do you get any sense inside the White House that they may be worried about the optics of all these projects?
I think they know what the optics are like, and they understand that they have a president that they're not going to talk out of it, right? And I think that the current group of people around him don't try to talk him out of things, because at least not out of things that they know he's really committed to. It's possible some of the first-term aides, John Kelly and folks like him might have tried to dissuade the president. This is not what he is surrounded by currently. They're trying to figure out how to manage the politics and manage the optics.